Hello, I am Ajiri Ogene, a member at the Center for Research and Education on Violence Against Women and Children at Western University. On behalf of the Knowledge Ops team, welcome to the Knowledge Ops Presents. The Knowledge Ops Presents series features information on trauma and violence-informed research and practice developed by members of the trauma-informed community of practice in their work related to preventing and addressing family violence. I want to acknowledge our work is located on the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Lepanwa, and Chinonhon nations. These lands are connected with the London Township and Sobra Treaties of 1796 and the Dish with One Spoon Covenant Wampum. We make this acknowledgement to counter the doctrine of discovery and recognize Indigenous lands and sovereignty. As a Black settler in this space, I am grateful that I benefit from it in numerous ways and wish to express gratitude to Mother Earth for the resources we're using and to honor all the First Nation, Métis, and Inuit people who have been living on this land for at least 15,000 years. We also want to share that October 24th to 27th of this year is Media Literacy Week. And today is Digital Citizen Day. We're pleased to be partnering with MediaSmarts, Canada's Centre for Digital Media Literacy, for this Knowledge Ops Presents. Today, we're joined by Dr. Kara Brisson-Boivin, Director of Research at MediaSmarts. Kara is a member of the Trauma-Informed Community of Practice working on the Models Project. Kara researches the various impacts of digital technology and culture on digital citizenship, digital well-being, and online resilience for Canadians broadly and youth in particular. Kara works with a number of academic partners on tri-agency funded research projects, private and public sector groups, as well as federal departments on online issues, including digital equity and inclusion, digital well-being, and online resilience, privacy, online aid, disinformation, and algorithms and artificial intelligence. So join me in welcoming Kara. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that warm welcome. I'm so thrilled to be here. As was mentioned, my name is Kara Brisson-Boivin, and I'm the Director of Research at MediaSmarts. I join you today from the Three Fires Confederacy of the Odawa, Chippewa, and Potawatomi peoples. MediaSmarts is Canada's Centre for Digital Media Literacy. We are a nonprofit charitable organization. We've been developing programs and resources for homes, schools, and communities for over 27 years now. And our vision is for everyone in Canada to have the skills and knowledge to engage critically with media in all forms. We achieve this primarily through research and policy, public awareness and engagement, and education. And at MediaSmarts, when we say digital media literacy, we are referring to sort of 5 core competencies: the ability to access, use, understand, engage, and create with media. Our colleagues on the education team have developed an entire framework for digital media literacy, including these 5 core competencies. So if you're interested in learning a bit more about that, you can visit mediasmarts.ca for more information. Today, I have the great pleasure of speaking to you about our intervention research project that is being funded by the Public Health Agency of Canada. It's called Moving On, which stands for Digital Literacy and Empowerment Skills for Survivors Models. So the goal of this project is to adapt, deliver, and evaluate digital media literacy resources for both practitioners in the violence against women sector and survivors of family violence. And we're really basing this project on the success of our foundational digital media literacy program called MediaSmarts. This program was designed in partnership with YWCA Canada, and it's designed to serve equity-seeking and underrepresented groups across the country. So we're starting from the foundational knowledge that we have developed in the creation of our MediaSmarts program. The goal of this particular project is to, again, adapt, deliver, and evaluate resources for particularly those who have experienced or are experiencing technology facilitated violence and abuse, or what is sometimes referred to as TFVA. TFVA is a form of abuse or controlling behavior involving the use of technology to coerce, stalk, survey, or harass another person. So specifically in this presentation, I'll be discussing the needs assessment phase of our intervention research project. The needs assessment phase has provided the foundation for our content adaptation and development and for our evaluation frameworks. We approach research with survivors and practitioners from a trauma and violence informed lens, whereby we see TFVA as a public health issue requiring collaborative and sustainable interventions. As you'll see, our research design process was collective and collaborative. It embraced a co-design model where we worked with our partners and advisors, and this included academics, researchers, educators, service providers, and practitioners working in the TFVA or violence against women sectors. And of course, it also included survivors. In applying a trauma and violence informed framework, our project aims to understand the effects of historical, intergenerational, and ongoing trauma and violence and structural, as interpersonal, but also structural violence that survivors have experienced. So rather than expecting survivors to engage in individualizing solutions, our project aims to ensure they can participate in collective efforts to prevent tech-facilitated violence and abuse while also recognizing a diversity of needs. So really, this project is focused on building and supporting survivors' collective online resilience. And by this, I mean the ability of a community or group to collectively respond to or recover from changing and sometimes stressful or adverse environments. In an online context, this is expressed as a person's ability to participate in safe and inclusive online communities, to draw strength and support from people around them, and to foster trust and engage in meaningful dialogue online. In designing this needs assessment and the focus groups in particular, we followed, again, a trauma and violence informed approach, and of course embraced all of the sort of traditional safeguards of qualitative research in terms of methodological best practices. But we also worked really closely with our service delivery partners and the network of advisors that we've built through this project. In particular, we worked and leaned on the kind of trust and relationships that they had built in the recruitment phase in order to protect in particular survivors' privacy, but to also make sure that, again, they were I guess, working first and foremost with those that they had already been in relationship with and built trust with. We also worked really closely with our service delivery partners to ensure that participants had access to supports, including counseling supports, throughout, the entire duration of their participation. So we designed and facilitated focus groups with 17 practitioners and 24 survivors of tech-facilitated violence and abuse across the country. We conducted these in the winter of 2023. And they were guided primarily by two sort of overarching research questions or interests or themes. And the first was around the needs of survivors and practitioners and their particular concerns when it came to tech facilitated violence and abuse. And the second was around the kind of digital media literacy resources and supports that might be needed to address those concerns. Our report, we have a fully published needs assessment report available on MediaSmarts.ca under our research report tab. The report itself includes much more detail about how we approached recruitment, the facilitation of these focus groups, especially from a trauma and violence informed lens. So I'd encourage you to go to the report for a bit more detail there. We also engaged in a collaborative analysis process where we worked in partnership with our advisory committee. And MediaSmart's research and education teams also met regularly to discuss key findings and insights. We're really lucky at MediaSmarts that we have expertise both in research and in education in-house. So we're constantly able to sort of bring that expertise together so that we can embrace a research to resource model and really sort of mobilize the findings of research, as quickly as we possibly can. So we grouped the critical needs articulated by survivors and practitioners into the following themes: online safety, security and privacy, access, devices and activities, skills, competencies, and needs. Again, the full report includes details, for each of these themes for both practitioners and survivors. It includes a sort of what we heard report under each of those themes. So I direct you to the report if you want to do a bit of a deeper dive there. Today, I would like to focus on the analytical themes that we've highlighted from this research. The first is on the need for more digital media literacy. There's a wide range of digital media literacy needs for both survivors and practitioners. The need for support in times of crises, or what we're calling digital triage content, came up quite often, as well as digital empowerment or support for long-term online engagement, and again, building that collective online resilience. An example of this we heard quite clearly from survivors was their desire and need or want to participate in digital storytelling. We heard about basic training on using devices and online resources, about participating safely and authentically online, and about the need for specific skills, such as online shopping and avoiding scams. Another analytical theme that arose was the idea or the impact of trauma and violence. And these findings were particularly complex. Practitioners were unsure of how to reassure survivors because it was difficult to determine how much of survivors' worry reflected realistic possibilities of harm that they could experience versus trauma from their experience sort of impacting their sense of online safety. And so we had really meaningful conversations here and challenging conversations about whether a practitioner could ever really fully reassure a survivor that they could not be hacked or monitored online, especially given the rate at which technology changes. And we really came to the conclusion that it's unlikely that one could ever definitively say that this was not a possibility. So I highlight this because I think it's really important that, we've discovered that the experience of in the trauma and violence is always already coloring the online or the sense of survivors' online safety. And this can be very difficult for practitioners to navigate as well when they're offering supports. We also heard about the difficulty of keeping up with best practices in online safety, that this is a full-time job for frontline workers who, of course, are not experts in digital technology. Perhaps not surprising, but digital media literacy levels are impacted by intersectional considerations like age, immigration status, language, and other intersections of experience, including, the trauma and violence that they have faced. We heard really clearly from both survivors and practitioners about the need for services and supports in languages other than English. Lots of frustration around, seeking any kind of tech support, whether it's online or offline, and how these tend to be at either English first or English only supports. And specifically, we heard from a contingent of focus group participants who were older adults that they felt particularly vulnerable when it came to online scams. We also heard another analytical theme was around the need for non-legal solutions. Survivors expressed feeling very unsupported by law enforcement and legal systems. So there was this need that arose to support frontline workers and empower survivors to engage in technology in ways that support healing and solidarity. This desire to build community or engage in community online was particularly important because survivors expressed, not feeling supported by, systems like the legal system. And I want to highlight two quotes in this regard. The first is from a survivor participant. "We don't get that protection from law enforcement," or "I never did. It's always like even when you call them, they won't." And the second, "But the man seems, even in the legal process, they get protected, they are protected, they get to say whatever they want about the woman." And we were hearing really clearly from, survivors, and I think these quotes help to articulate a sort of general sense that they had to look out for and protect themselves. And this also carried over into the online context. While they had this desire to embrace the online and to seek community, especially given their sense of not having sort of the same supports in the legal system, they were also very hyper aware of how their participation in these communities could be monitored and potentially used against them, especially if they are engaged in any kind of legal proceeding. And so this added a kind of urgency and importance to their increased calls for digital media literacy supports. And the final theme I'll speak to is on safety versus silencing. We heard that safety in this context is often conflated with silencing. For example, victim blaming attitudes, like telling survivors to stay offline or get rid of their devices. Survivors and practitioners felt quite frustrated that they couldn't reap the benefits of being online without taking what they felt were risks above and beyond what other users had to take to be online. And this left them feeling quite isolated. And I'll give just two brief examples. We heard from survivors that they couldn't use their real name on their LinkedIn profile or on their social media profiles for fear of being harassed or stalked or doxxed, which is when someone's personal information is released in a very public way. And this had direct consequences for them in terms of their employability or seeking employment, and frankly, just in terms of their ability to connect with family and friends. So some next steps for us in this project. As I mentioned, the needs assessment that we've conducted and the findings that we're highlighting are going to, or are the foundation upon which we will begin to design and develop program content. We are working with, again, our Digital Smarts program, and we're going to update and adapt 4 existing workshops from that program for survivors, including facilitation guides and accompanying tip sheets for facilitators or practitioners who will be delivering this content. But we are also developing 2 new workshops as a result of this needs assessment. The first workshop will be focused on healthy online relationships, and the second will be focused on digital storytelling. And these 2 additional workshops are sort of in direct response to the needs we heard around building collective online resilience and digital empowerment. We're also working on a trauma and violence informed handbook or facilitator guide for teaching or delivering digital media literacy education. I think this will be a really exciting and much needed contribution to the digital media literacy field. It will be, of course, directly relevant for those working with survivors of violence, but I think this trauma and violence informed approach will be relevant for many others in many other contexts. We're also, I mentioned at the outset, working on our digital triage content. I had hoped it would be available for this presentation. It's going to be available any day now, both online on MediaSmarts website, but also in print. We'll be sharing it directly with our service delivery partners, and we'll have some additional print copies available. The triage content is important safety and well-being information for survivors in crisis. It will focus around 3 areas: securing devices, communicating safely, and browsing safely. And I'm really excited to say it's available in 5 different languages currently, and possibly more as the program develops. So thank you so much for this invitation to the Knowledge Hub, and thank you so much for listening today. I know we have a couple minutes for questions, so I look forward to answering those.
Thank you, Kara. Well put. Thank you for taking the time to share with us. We're eager to take questions. I have the first one, and my colleague Sabri will I'll take the questions from the French participants. So the first one, I'm actually building on what you said last, which is the next steps, speaking to the adaptation that will be done. So I'm guessing this is the first one. The question is, building on this current research, how would you, or are you considering modifying it to be culturally appropriate for persons who we know that there is overrepresentation for them as well, so Indigenous survivors as well as Black survivors?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you so much. I will say that we in-house at MediaSmarts, we have French media education specialists, so we're familiar with the process of cultural adaptation, so not just straight translation for the French Canadian community. We don't have expertise in-house for either Indigenous or Black communities specifically, but we are working with partners for this very reason. And in particular, we're working with Indigenous evaluation consultants to help also ensure that the intervention and evaluation framework we're developing will give us feedback that is meaningful for that community in particular. I will say, while we are keeping those communities, top of mind, as you say, given the overrepresentation, we do want to allow or create a program that allows for communities to adapt it to suit their own needs, so in a way that will be meaningful to them. So we're balancing a couple of things there, but yeah, thank you. That's a fantastic question.
Thank you. Over to my colleague.
Merci beaucoup, Cara, pour ta présentation très informative.
Thank you for your great and rich presentation, Kara. We have a question from one of our participants who would like to know what type of professionals participated in this evaluation, this assessment. Could you clarify that for us?
Yeah, thank you. Another good question. At the sake of protecting people's identities, I won't get too deep into who participated. I'll just provide some, perhaps additional detail around their roles. These were a lot of frontline workers at different shelters and violence against women community organizations across the country. Some were in rural communities, some were in urban, centers. Some served Indigenous communities in particular. A combination of social workers, sort of intake workers, some executive directors, program coordinators. So kind of from that, a broad kind of swath of folks who are working with survivors in a bunch of different ways.
Excellent, excellent. Merci beaucoup. Une dernière question avant que je donne ma parole à Gerganis.
Excellent. The last question before I go back to Gerganis. What advice would you have for other projects who want to do a needs assessment considering trauma and violence? You talked about consulting experts, community. Are there other things you would like to share with us for people who have projects who would like to do needs assessment considering trauma and that are informed by trauma and violence?
Yeah, thank you. That's such a good question. And I could go on for a very long time, so I'll try to keep it brief. I would say a couple of things. You've already mentioned in your question, the need to be working really closely with community. In this case, we knew we wanted and needed to work very closely with folks working in the violence against women sector. We're not a violence against women sector or organization in that sector. We're digital media literacy experts, so we knew it was really important going in that we both ensured that there was a need for this kind of work, but that we were also working with that community to understand the problem. I would say from a practical or research perspective, there's a couple of things to keep in mind. Time, because it takes a lot of time to do this work well. And then also flexibility. We learned along the way that we had to make a lot of different pivots. When we started this project, we were still dealing with a lot of COVID restrictions, so that required additional levels of flexibility. But I think, and it's not necessarily specific to trauma and violence informed or this community, I do think a lot of projects have had to grapple with some of the effects of COVID. But one of the things that is specific to this community was a real need to protect their location. Some of our partners would not disclose the location of where survivors were and didn't want us to know that, understandably. And so being online was very helpful because we could conduct focus groups over Zoom, so we didn't need to know where they were or where they were Zooming in from. On the other hand, it created a whole bunch of challenges around how to communicate safety to folks who are joining on Zoom calls, what that meant in terms of whether we needed to, have cameras on or off, and just the understanding that, when you're having focus groups that are dealing with traumatic content and doing that online, that can be quite difficult to ensure that the right sort of safeguards are in place. So this flexibility of wanting to meet people where they were and then balance all of these competing needs when you're dealing with, especially trying to conduct research from a trauma and violence informed lens. And so it just kind of comes back to this idea of needing to give yourself time, because it's going to take time to sort out, with partners, how you're going to balance all of those competing needs to get to a place where at the end of the day, participants are both safe enough, to be able to, are safe enough and protected, and accessing resources and sources of support as well, to be able to effectively and participate, but also get something back from the process, which I think is really important. And at MediaSmarts, we come to research from an empowerment, perspective or lens. We see research as being very reciprocal. So we always want to make sure that, participants are also leaving the experience with knowledge in some way, shape, or form, or with resources in some way, shape, or form. So yeah, flexibility, time. Those are two big ones.
Merci beaucoup. Merci, Cara, de partager ces savoirs experts.
Thank you, Cara, for sharing this experiential knowledge that will, I hope, be useful for other projects that have to do needs assessment informed by trauma and violence. We have one last question. Ariji.
I think that's all the time we have. I'm not sure we can take another question, but we would definitely love to express our heartfelt gratitude to you, Kara, for your expertise, for your time. And on behalf of CRIVAC, we're really saying thank you. We believe that this knowledge and awareness that our participants have been privy to enjoy over the last 30 minutes will really lead to a lasting impact when it comes to digital literacy for survivors of abuse. And yes, once again, thank you. We're sure that we can get, I think there's just two other questions. We can get them to you and maybe find a way to share with our participants as well. And we also want to thank the interpreters for their time today. And we hope everyone has a wonderful afternoon. The recording will be available as we shared in the beginning. So you can watch out for those. Thank you.